Is Batman really dead? Is Red Hood killing people? Does Batgirl have to grease up her back brace every night? And is Robin really the guy to take the Fallen Protector's spot? Those questions and more are going to be answered in this video as I review Gotham Knights, coming out soon to the PC and consoles, locked to 30 FPS on the consoles. And with its fair share of bad press, this question is going to come up. Is Gotham facing a very tough challenge? Yes, an ice cube swim in their own blood. No need to point out the obvious. If you guys like these videos, give them a thumbs up. I got a ton more coming. Let's do this. First, yes, Batman is dead.
I'm proud of you, Dick.
The streets of Gotham have now been taken over by a new vast criminal underworld, or underworlds. The inhabitants of Gotham depend on Batgirl, Nightwing, Red Hood, and Robin to keep them safe while also inspiring hope, discipline, and terror among the city's police and criminals. You must become the new Dark Knight and prevent the streets from descending into disorder by solving puzzles that link the darkest periods in the city's history, vanquishing villains in epic clashes, and leveling up all your heroes. And you're going to need to, because there's a lot of combat. Batman was just barely keeping things together like a new tenant in a bad neighborhood, just smashing every cockroach you can, but they're everywhere. And these four are pretty much alone, well, aside from Alfred. You might be wondering, where are the other superheroes in this world? Listen, they care. Even Clark Kent sends you an email. That's like getting a thank you letter from The Rock's stunt double. He can't make it, parties and shit, but he sends his best. And that's fitting because these four are going to have to be their best. Gotham's always been a very dark world, and you experience that right from the starting. Inhabited by the constant infection of crime, corruption, and cool villains like a dying body, with Batman in the past historically designed like an antibody, consistently keeping everything at bay, but never quite defeating it. The feel of all of that ends up coming upon the shoulders of these four characters. Straight after you bury Bruce in a small funeral, the three crime fighters, Batgirl, Robin, and Nightwing, and one criminal who pretends he's good, which is Red Hood, show up and decide to take on the mantle of Batman. Oh, they have their doubts. Their teamwork is like the loosest game of shirts and skins ever. They live in the Belfry, which is their home base. Batman's historical memory remains in a bits of his armor on the pedestals in this location, a massive copy of the Bat computer looking out of place when the lights are on, and all manner of assorted gadgetry that you can use and wish you could use as you engage in the main story, as well as the side missions and crimes of the game. It's a third-person action brawler set up a great deal like the Batman games. Here also offering drop-in and drop-out untethered co-op so that two crime fighters can go out and patrol and work down the enemies either as a team or in separate fights. And they are also adding a 4-player battle PvE kind of free mode that's coming out soon after the game launches. Now, each character has their own combat system. Roughly, they correspond to finding out just how many traumatic brain injuries an enemy can have before they forget to put their pants on. Batgirl is surprisingly a good tank. I say surprisingly because she's already got her back sheared off, then stapled back together, and had to relearn to walk just to be here. She's hard-hitting. She pounds on enemies with the best of them, and she can also hack stuff in the environment. Nightwing is a good mix. Some ranged, but up close as escrima sticks, take out enemies in insanely fast combos. Robin was one of the more interesting characters to play. I like the bow staff. It reaches out farther than a lot of the up-close attacks of everybody else, but has some good area attacks, and you can do some group control there as well. I like the modern martial arts kind of bow staff competitors, and that's just what you get here, with every kind of move being super flashy. Now, Red Hood is ranged, very high damage, and has some awesome side skills that are actually cooler than I thought they would be when I first saw the game. And each one of these characters also has their own trait system as well as movement systems that you can get later. You can patrol at night, taking on random crimes, and also gaining hints as the next big story or mission reveal comes up as you take down larger crime types. The game starts out with a couple at first, but as you continue playing, they start to unlock more and more of these different crimes, which fills up the city. At the first, most are going to be showing up and you're going to be beating up a very particular set of bad guys in locations. Later on, they're going to run from you or have to have you save cops from getting killed as enemies consistently try to take them out and you need to defend them. Other times you're defusing bombs and hacking explosive devices while protecting the area so a computer can work. The rolling out of more and more types of crazy criminals doing wacky jobs actually keeps the game from getting stale because there are a couple issues. One of the biggest is the AI. AI has been going to school for 25 years and still hasn't passed third grade. Luckily, you can set up the difficulty, but oddly enough, on the hardest difficulty, they become bullet sponges, requiring you to absolutely make sure your equipment is perfectly aligned and that you're hitting every single mark, but it just doesn't feel that good, even with them running, then attacking, then retreating, then running and attacking, and they just sort of feel lost a lot of the time. And no matter what difficulty you set it on, it never feels exactly like it's balanced perfectly. Now, speaking of equipment and balance, the game has a ton of skins for each character, classics from comics and movies. They also have your own set that you can modify, adding mods to the armor, adding elemental damage, health, all sorts of things. and those mods can also be fused together to make more powerful ones with some experimentation. To get the supplies for making those weapons and armor and otherwise, each enemy factions have their drops of equipment tied loosely to what they do and who they are. So you may have to track down the Court of Owls faction to get a particular item to make a new suit. This works pretty well. It keeps you consistently moving and wanting to get different items. There are a lot of crafting items. You're going to see that in the game the moment you end up playing just a little bit. You're going to have a bunch of boxes there, all from different factions. The equipment itself shares looks but not levels, meaning as you go up in level, you do need to make or remake weapons to fit the new level that you're going to be at. You can also craft in the field, but if you do that, the items are basically remote crafted, and you still need to go back to the belfry and end your nightly patrol to get them, losing any crimes that night that you didn't solve. What I did like about this is it forced you to go back, which actually I don't have an issue with, and it also made me go back and do some of the other actions that open up in the belfry versus just randomly letting all of these different crimes come up and consistently fighting them, because that was actually a little bit boring to me after a while. Return to the Belfry isn't just closing the night, though. It's also where those main missions are staged and where you get a lot of the data, deciding to use your crime board to investigate the main story and put the pieces together, talk to some of the other heroes, and rest up. Basically, the world in the Belfry is daytime. The missions and the random crimes are all at night. I can only assume they saw the last Batman movie and realized just how stupid Batman looks next to a building in daytime. Combat itself is very mixed. You have these groupings like most games of this style now, with the change being that light and heavy attacks are on the same button, just holding it down. Now, some games we've seen like this, I've just never been a huge fan. Combos are interspersed by taps then and hold presses on those buttons, depending on the character, while dodging is another button, and range attacks like darts are also on one button, with short taps being quick flicks and holding the button being a shotgun-like crowd effect. The game's big thing is momentum. Dodging enemies, striking perfectly, and doing damage raises momentum up, which gets to a particular point, and then you can pull off specific moves for each character that you've unlocked. And some of those are pretty cool, like leaving holographic decoys. It works pretty well. Holding and tapping the same button for combos never feels as solid as I think it ever should be. It's just something that you notice a little bit more here for some reason. Now, constantly balancing momentum with using cool moves is one thing, but there are a number of enemies in the game that require very specific strikes to break their guards, like piercing strikes or dodging a number of their attacks and then unleashing one huge one, or timing a single perfect block for a good counter. It's not exactly deep, but it's not shallow either. It's sort of right in the middle, like everything in this game. One of the most profound issues I came away from Gotham with is that, like every new part that I unlocked, it got to a certain point, then another new activity unlocked, but the original one never fleshed out or got deeper or felt like it was anything other than just a stepping stone for the next. Even investigations for murders and crimes are looking at 4 or 5 points, then just saying, yeah, this one is the clue, and that's it. Gotham is a king sheet on a single bed. No matter how comfortable it is, fitting is important, and if it's too much, that's an issue. There's a lot of work that's actually gone into this game, though. Some devs' idea of risk is like throwing the washer into the dryer without emptying it first because they don't want to make the effort. That simply is not an issue here. It's just that a good deal of Gotham's experience doesn't feel as focused as I would have liked, and it feels a little bit like an online game that really doesn't ever require that, but you're always sort of waiting for that moment. Speaking for a moment I know you guys have probably been waiting for, let's talk about the presentation. Let's get this out of the way. Lighting in this game is actually gorgeous, even on the consoles. Reflections of a superhero running by a car window as you spring to take on enemies, or the soaked tops of buildings when you're fighting main boss battles. It's an excellent, very saturated comic book feel to everything, and the ability for them to show the entire city and all of the lighting effects, for example, a crime and the red and blues of the police cars 3 miles away, is really quite cool. However, the consoles did choose to go with ray tracing and 30 FPS with no current performance mode. It is noticeable in both the excellence of the lighting in many locations that can look stunning against that lack of 60 FPS, which would have been nice in a game so focused on multi-enemy battle. Is it playable? Absolutely. Is it a bit chunky? Absolutely. Now, performance on the PC, very high recommendation-wise, is this game. A 2070 being pushed even at, your high settings for 1080p and going in lockstep up from there. The game is heavy. Not Arkham Knight heavy. That game launched like it was launching 2 other friggin' versions of itself, but it's still requiring a lot. Be aware that this is also impacted by having multiple players playing the game. 2 characters on screen means both can set off explosions, use special effects that fill the screen with smoke or fire, and trigger all sorts of gameplay moments when you are both on screen. I gotta say though, I actually like the game's look of the suits. I liked them a lot. Yeah, sure, you can change some of their colors and stuff like that, but it was the designs themselves. I was quite surprised by a couple of them, and I just really liked their look. Or seeing a marquee boss rolling gangster style up to you, mistaking a dude in tights for someone you want to pick on in a dark alley is awesome. The animation of the battles themselves, the special moves, and the heroes are okay. They do have the Batman typical slide where you hold a button, and as you slide towards an enemy, things don't exactly line up. Some are great, some are not. There's a little bit of an odd half jank that you see in some animations where it's almost like you're starting to see after the first 10 frames of animation a bit more of a pop than I would like, and there's some animation blending issues that seem to crop up, in particular with traversal. And traversal is an important part for multiple reasons. The first is that despite the original Batman game's consistent use of reasoning to keep people off the main streets, Gotham doesn't do that. It does have people on the streets, but it's been hit by a massive plague of some kind prior to the game starting because that NPC density is low. One of the things that helps all the presentation come together is audio, which I want to talk about musically. I think this game is actually top-notch despite some odd choices that they use.
Definitely nothing connecting it to this guy Langstrom.
If only Bruce had had the chance to tell us what he was working on. This case, it's like reading a book with half the pages missing.
If anyone can figure it out, it's you, Babs.
This is a tough one, even for Oracle.
I wasn't talking about Oracle or Batgirl. I was talking about Barbara freaking Gordon.
Since that ill-fated duel, all the League can agree on is carrying out Raish's mission.
Why would Raish kill his next in line? None of this makes sense.
Yes, kid! Thanks for seeing me! I should check that out!
Drop your weapon! You should have blocked!
With her!
Dark cinematic with full beat moments end up fading away to these very slow theme elements at times, and I actually like that. During some of the battles as well, there's a almost broadening of expectations here. There's a synth beat that pops up and mixes with classical I didn't expect. It gives a feeling of two histories coming together, the future of these characters and the past, and the Batman and the cinematic feel that you would expect. The game does leave a lot of empty space and exploration with minimalistic music presentation. Much of this seems to let the game's audio engine present opportunities for crime fighting without having to use the AR vision, which I actually think is awesome. I love to be able to hear people calling out for help. You can hear them a good deal away and you can figure out where they are and you can go help them. However, hours and hours and hours into the game, you're still just hearing that, and I think it pulls back a little bit on that cinematic feel. That'll be up to everybody, and I think everybody's going to have a different opinion of it. And that will also correspond to voice. I dig the hell out of Cobblepot. I like his version. It's schemier. It's also understanding what's going on around him. Played very well by the voice actor who plays Adam Jensen in Deus Ex. Really liked his. The rest are pretty okay. No one seems really excellent though, and due to the way the game handles interaction with the team and the idea of having one story for everybody, there's a bit of individuality that is actually lost, and I noticed that right away when a couple different cutscenes didn't really understand which character I was when I took a particular action. This is also, of course, because two people can play it in the co-op, and I get that and totally understand it. I think some of it is also the writing, though. The big crux has happened, and that's Batman dying, so you're trying to solve the mysteries of the city, and the difficulty is really trying to find a resonance of any kind emotionally for the new players, and you're left just petering around doing Batman's cleanup work for a long time. Then it starts to focus on your team taking over. This becomes much better later on when you start unlocking contacts around the city. And lastly, the recordings for sound. The processing on a lot of the audio is very good. I'll talk about that in a second. The tire tread sound on Uneven Road is nailed though. The slam of explosions, all that's fine. Those were really good. Environmentally, when it comes down to it, you jump into an office or a factory and the enemy's spawning chambers, which gives all this nice hush and reverb and feel to everything. Those were very well done. There are different things that happen with some of the other characters, and there's perfect hits and different sound effects for some items and actions that you take. Overall, this was pretty good. Let's talk about fun factor. The game's no Batman. That's cool because it is not called Batman. It's called Gotham Knight. So actually doing things a bit different, I am 100% for. This game does style different. It has more specials, a large number of playable characters. It doesn't feel as set as Batman, which also means it doesn't feel as deep. But it's refreshing using all those weapons and special abilities that these characters have. And when you start adding elemental abilities with the mod chips to some of the weapons, freezing those guys in place, that is sweet. But for me, the game started to wear thin. It wasn't terrible. It was a lot of fun at first, but the combat just gets grindy, and the way the game doles out the missions and challenges and having to switch between them to figure out this thing or that thing, the game never feels right. And it feels like there's parts where you're in a part of the game and you expect things to work a certain way and they work a completely different way. For example, there's a quest where you're using scanners in the game almost all the time. They're your AR ability to look around the game world. In one of the quests, they're like, please look around for something. You start doing it and you're looking around going, where is it? I don't get it. Nothing's showing up. And you find out, well, this time you need to use your normal peepers. I have no problem with that normally. I actually like that. But it could have given some kind of warning, because the idea that you can't see it close by with your AR scanner means it is very easy and very likely that some players will feel they're in the wrong place and need to go outside of that location to try to find it. But I think surprisingly for me, it was the combat, the grindiness of it. And when I started to unlock new movements and motions, they were really cool, but every one just felt the same as everything else, especially when you continue to play the game more and more and you get those crimes popping up and you go, everything, there was just a repeating of it and a spreading of those missions between the main missions and your side missions. And suddenly it feels like the split there is ever widening no matter what you're doing. Let's get to the rating for this one. This game is so much like that friend you have who always says they're going to do some big plan, then halfway through they change their plan and they have just as much energy for the next plan, but it only goes halfway. That is a lot about Gotham Knights for me. I can see a lot of people loving this, but personally, I would say it's probably a wait. There's a lot here, but the grind continually showed up no matter what I was doing. And I like these kind of games normally, grabbing different loot, but the loot didn't have the differentiation I was actually hoping for. There wasn't a lot to it. And when I started looking at some of the costumes, I really liked those. But in particular, you've got your weapons. And you start looking at those and start realizing just how the mods work. And it always felt like they should just do a little bit more. A very good example of that is the skill systems. The skill system really isn't that good. You get some cool stuff with the mastery once you unlock the last tier of skills, but the actual skills themselves are pretty boring. Plus 5% to this, plus 10% to this. A couple give you a new additional part of an attack, which is very cool, but for the most part, they actually don't. And that is sort of a mind killer for me. So, not a bad game, just personally, not really something that I would say somebody should rush out and get. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys like these reviews. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. Make sure you subscribe. Check out the Patreon. Check out Facebook, Twitter, what have you, MySpace, MyFace, whatever the different apps I'm on. No matter what, if you get the game, I hope you enjoy it. If you don't, hey, maybe on sale somewhere, you can go ahead and grab it. I'm also really excited to see what their DLC plans are. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.